Why does someone understand reparenting completely, the concept, the research, where it comes from, why it matters, and still not know how to actually start? Not because they haven't tried, not because they're not ready, but because most of what gets called how to begin asks for something the nervous system doesn't yet know how to give. This video isn't more theory, it's 5 specific things you can do this week. Not in a dedicated practice hour you'll never find, not with emotional readiness you haven't built yet, but in the middle of ordinary moments you're already in. And by the end, the question of where to start will have a different kind of answer. Here's what happens to most people who understand reparenting and still can't seem to begin. They find the concept, it lands, it makes sense. They feel the recognition, the quiet internal, yes, that's it. And then they go looking for what to do next. And what they find, almost everywhere, is a version of the same instruction. Journal to your inner child. Sit with the feeling. Write the letter you never received. And for a significant number of people, particularly those who grew up in homes where emotions were managed rather than felt, that instruction lands like a door with no handle. Not because something is wrong with them, but because those practices ask for emotional access that the nervous system hasn't yet been taught to sustain. Here is what the research on nervous system development consistently shows. New patterns don't form in dedicated emotional practice spaces. They form inside the existing patterns, the ones already running. The moments that actually rewire anything are not the ones you set aside for healing. They are the ordinary moments. The trigger, the contraction, the familiar pull, where something, even briefly, goes differently. That's the common thread you'll hear in all 5 of what follows. None of them require a particular emotional state. None of them require time you don't have. Every single one of them lives inside something that is already happening. And that matters, because the child who learned that their needs were inconvenient didn't learn that in a dedicated practice hour. They learned it in ordinary moments. That's where the unlearning begins too. So let's start with the first practice. Practice 1, the 2-second pause before the apology. Not stopping the apology. Not analyzing where it came from. Just, before the words come out, 2 seconds. That's it. You're not trying to change the behavior yet. You're not trying to feel something about it. You're just inserting a moment of witness between the trigger and the response. That 2-second pause is not a small thing. It is the first time, in that loop, that there is a you watching what happens instead of a you inside what happens. And your nervous system notices the difference, even when you don't feel it yet. Practice 2, 1 physical act of care per day, delivered to yourself consciously. Not a wellness routine, not a habit stack. 1 thing, a glass of water, a few minutes outside, your hand on your own shoulder. Done with the internal orientation of, I am doing this because I matter. Not because it's healthy, not because it's on the list, because the part of you that learned needing was dangerous needs evidence. Small, repeated, embodied evidence that need can be met without consequence. Here's the thing, nobody explains about that. It will feel strange before it feels natural. It might feel performed. It might feel hollow. That hollow feeling is not evidence that nothing is happening. It is what a nervous system sounds like when it is learning to tolerate care for the first time. Stay with it anyway. Practice 3. Naming the emotional state before managing it. Sodojoro, when the familiar contraction arrives, the low alarm, the preemptive shrink, the sudden irritation with no obvious source, before doing anything with it, say to yourself, silently or aloud, I notice I'm feeling. Not, why am I feeling this? Not, I shouldn't be feeling this. Just the naming. What attachment researchers have found is that the act of labeling an emotional state, even briefly, even imprecisely, creates a measurable shift in how the nervous system processes it. The naming creates just enough distance between the feeling and the flood to make a different response possible. This is not suppression. It is the opposite. It's the first moment the feeling is actually acknowledged. And that makes a very specific kind of sense. Because for a lot of people in this space, the feeling was never acknowledged growing up. Not by anyone else. And eventually, not by themselves either. Naming it to yourself is the beginning of a different pattern. Now we come to the last 2, and these go deeper. Practice 4. 1 question once a day instead of 1 directive. Most of us who grew up in homes where emotional needs were invisible learn to manage ourselves with directives. Pull it together. Stop overreacting. Just get through today. The internal voice that runs the self-management often sounds a lot like the parent who couldn't meet the need, not out of cruelty, out of fluency. That's the language that was modeled. The practice is this. Once a day, at a moment of stress or struggle or low-level alarm, replace the directive with a question. Instead of, "What's wrong with you?" pull it together. Ask, "What do you need right now?" You don't have to answer it. You don't have to act on the answer. The asking is the practice. Because the part of you that learned its needs were dangerous has never been asked. Practice 5. A repair moment after a rupture with yourself. This one is the least talked about, and it may be the most important. When you react in a way you later regret, when you shut down or lash out or disappear into yourself, or do the thing you have been trying for years not to do, the standard internal response is criticism. I did it again, I'm still the same. When will this actually change? The practice is different. After the rupture, not in the middle of it. After, you return to yourself. Not to analyze, not to fix. Just to say internally, that happened. I see it. I'm still here. This is called repair. And here is why it matters more than most people understand. The wound of emotional neglect is not only the absence of attunement, it is the absence of repair, the absence of an adult who, after a rupture, came back. Who said, "That was hard. I'm still here. We're okay." The part of you that is still waiting for that return doesn't need it to come from outside anymore. And that is the thread running through all 5 of these. None of them require a particular emotional state. None of them require access to the past. Every single one of them is a moment. A 2-second pause, a question, a return, where you become the adult who shows up for the part of you that learned to stop expecting anyone would. That is what reparenting actually looks like in real life. Not a letter, not a ritual, a moment. Inside a moment where something goes differently. If what this video opened is something you want to take further, not with more concepts, but with actual structure for the first week, there's a 7-day guided journal in the description built exactly for this. Each day has a prompt, emotional context so the blank page isn't just blank, and a reparenting script you can use when it gets hard to know what to say to yourself. It's a gentle first week, not a transformation, a beginning. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. There is one more thing to address directly because it will happen. Probably in the first few days, possibly in the first few hours. You will do one of these practices, and you will feel nothing, or you will feel like you performed it. Like you went through the motions and some more genuine version of you was watching from somewhere else. Uninvested. That feeling has a name. It is not failure. It is what a nervous system sounds like when it is encountering a pattern it has no prior map for. The nervous system does not update in moments of feeling. It updates in moments of repetition. The first 10 times you pause before the apology, you probably won't feel the pause as meaningful. The 11th time, something very slightly shifts. Not dramatically, not noticeably, but the body registers it. A pattern that keeps appearing in research on early relational wounding is that the people who make the most lasting change are not the ones who found the process emotionally resonant from the beginning. They are the ones who continued in the absence of feeling, who showed up on the day it felt hollow, who returned after the rupture even when nothing in them wanted to. This is not a character flaw. It is a lesson that outlived its usefulness. The lesson that if something doesn't feel significant, it probably isn't. But significance and impact are not the same thing here. The most impactful moments in nervous system change are often the quietest, the ones you won't remember, the ones that are already working. You're not behind, you're in it. And the version of you that was always there, before the managing, before the monitoring, before you learned that need was a thing to be apologized for, that version doesn't need you to arrive already healed. It needs you to begin this week, in the small moments, in the gap between the trigger and the reaction. That's where it starts. That has always been where it starts. If you want the first week already structured, prompts, emotional context, and the reparenting scripts built in, the link in the description and the pinned comment is the next step. Which of these 5 felt most immediately possible? And which one felt like it would be hardest to actually do? Say it below. Here is what to carry from this. Reparenting is not a practice you add to your life. It is a different way of being present to what's already happening in it, and choosing in that moment to be the witness instead of the manager. To be the adult who shows up instead of the voice that says what's wrong with you. Pull it together. 5 moments this week. That's the entire ask. 1 2-second pause before the automatic apology. 1 physical act of care you deliver with intention. 1 naming of the feeling before you manage it away. 1 question. What do you need right now instead of a directive? 1. Return to yourself after you do the thing you've been trying not to do. None of those moments will feel like healing. Some of them will feel hollow. Some will feel like the performance of something you're not sure you believe yet. Do them anyway, because the child who learned that needing was dangerous didn't learn that in a dramatic moment. They learned it in 100 ordinary ones. And that lesson gets unlearned the same way. Not in a single cathartic breakthrough, but in 100 ordinary moments where something, very quietly, goes differently. That's where the version of you that was always there begins to find its way back. Not in the journal you've been putting off starting. In the pause. In the question. In the return. This week. Starting now.